nothing in here should be a surprise. I will look at item 4.15, base budget requests funding. There are 6 of them. Anything anyone wishes to deal with separately? Seeing none, can I get a mover of that section? Mayor Jaworski, Councillor Veith. Any discussion? None. All those in favor? Those are carried. That takes us to the 2 base budget requests that are uncontrollable. Apparently we have to tell the region to treat water and we have to buy water from them. Mover of that section, Mayor Jaworski, seconded by Councillor Bonnegar. All those in favor? That's carried. Then we have base budget requests recommended. I know Councillor Veith wishes to remove item 2, which is item B54. Are there any other of those 5 items that Council would like to discuss? Seeing none, can I get a mover of item 1 and then 3 to 5? Councillor Bonnegar, Councillor Bodley. Any conversation? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried. I can take the hand up with the fruit as is moving in favor too.
I went through you, Chair. I was trying to be professional and discreet.
I'll take anything. That works. Councillor Veith, item B54. B54, where are you?
Yes, it sounds like we're playing bingo. I'm not a fan of the leaf pickup program. I think it has lots of challenges, and so I can't support $25,000 more dollars. And we do need to do a better communication project on that. But right now, $25,000 is a lot of money to throw at a project that is in trouble. So, and I know my constituents most of them will hate me saying that, but it doesn't work, and it's the biggest one of, well, the top 2 of issues in my ward. So I will not be supporting $25,000 for that program.
So perhaps it would be useful to get some further information on what B54 is coming from, and then we can see what other conversation we'll have. So we have Mr. Rapp.
Certainly, Chair Henry, to all of Council, including Councillor Veith, of course. The $25,000 that we're requesting comes from the stormwater utility, which I think doesn't surprise anybody, but it is actually recognizing the actual cost of the program. Last year, the cost was about $270,000, of which about $95,000 was in wages and about $175,000 in equipment. This last year, we did have to replace one of the leaf blower units, which added to some of that cost, because again, we have to keep through operating pay into the reserves to ultimately replace the next leaf blower. So the costs have gone up a little bit. So that explains why the need for the additional $25,000 and how that overall leaf program is split between wages and capital. If that helps Council understand. Thank you.
So whether or not this item is approved, the cost exists, and so is either a deficit pressure or it's funded. I saw Councillor Freeman's hand.
Well, I'm just going to put it out there. How much are we going to save if we get rid of this program altogether? Because you know what? The ability to meet with people's expectations on this program is 0. And the emails related to this program have gone beyond, like it's harassment. Like it's not friendly. It is you do nothing for me and you are useless. And it's staggering. I don't think staff should have to deal with that harassment. And my gosh, my parents would say to me, if you can't appreciate the food that's been put in front of you, you should go find it somewhere else. And feels like the same to me on this program. And the other thing is too, is this program was never designed to take 60-foot maple trees from my backyard for me to like relocate 40 bags of leaves to the front of my yard. And I stopped doing it 3 years ago. I don't know. As much as people are going to hate this, I think we need to reset the button on this. In Kitchener, people have to deliver their leaves to parks. So maybe we can look at some public park locations, whether or not that can be a leaf collection point, or they can go in with one singular big front end loader and start loading trucks from there. I don't know what that looks like, but we need to reset the pulse on this one.
So I saw a few hands go up. I'm not sure which one I saw first, so I'll go out to Councillor Vasek, and then I'll come back around, and then maybe we can have some help from staff on some guidance for how we might proceed, notwithstanding various things. Councillor Vasek.
Yeah, through you, Chair Henry. I'm going to support this this year, and because I as much as it is quite challenging to be on the receiving end of quite bad behavior. Not verging on harassment, but harassment, and I think that needs to be said in public. I do think people really do appreciate the program, and I do think it is a nice service to offer. But I guess I'll say again, just in terms of the communication, I think that could be one area to be explored, as well as naturalization tools and ideas and other ways to make sure that the program is being used kind of as intended, but it is a service that people really appreciate. And so that's why I'm going to support it this year.
I think before I go to other hands, I saw Mr. Rapp's hand a while back, and I don't want to leave him hanging like a leaf that hangs way too long before we can collect it.
Exactly. Thank you, Chair Henry. I was just going to suggest that if council wishes, we could go back through Engage Waterloo again, and we did get over 1,500 responses last year, or 2 years ago, I think, and we could do that process again and involve more education as well about the value of keeping the leaves on the property too at times, or mulching them and keeping them on. So we can do that, and then we can bring back some options, if you wish, for council for 2020, the 3-year capital and operating budget.
And that's reasonably consistent with the direction I was going to suggest for council, that we take this item as funding the persistent deficit, which is already being built into the stormwater rates that we approved last month, and refer, as Mr. Rapp had suggested, a bigger conversation to 2020, and leave staff to report back on how that will unfold. I had other hands, Councillor Bonagor, then I'll. I think November can be prime vacation month for many people, but unfortunately we do compel our service delivery staff to be there for the good and the bad and the ugly. Yeah, Steve can't leave. That's an important. That rhymes too. That's a good motto. Steve can't leave. Councillor Bonagor.
I was just going to say that for this year, it makes sense for me. I plan to support it for this year, but I look forward to having that deeper conversation, because when we're having a lot of discussions right now about the challenges of snow clearing, I think that can help put leaf collection in a different light as well, where we're looking at how we're allocating our resources. So for this year, I plan to support it, but I do look forward to Mr. Rapp bringing that discussion forward.
Okay. Is anyone else who wanted to speak to the item on the table? Mayor?
Well, more of a question to the chair. Is this something that we're going to be dealing with now, or are you suggesting that we don't deal with it? Wasn't quite sure.
I'm suggesting that there's interest around the table for funding this item as presented. So there's a motion that ought to be presented to council to approve the budget. But then I think I would entertain a separate motion to basically translate Commissioner Rapp's direction.
That's what I thought. So
to staff.
I'm going to move it because we're recognizing a cost that actually exists. Yeah. We can't stick our head in the sand and say it doesn't exist. It does exist. Let's recognize that. If for some reason through the further consultation we change our mind, this will be either a budget pressure or budget relief 3-year budget. So I'm happy to move it.
So I'll take Mayor Jaworski moving it, Councillor Bonagor seconding it, and then we'll take a separate motion after this on the direction. So any further discussion on B54? Specifically, seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? Councillor Veith. And then I'll look for a motion. I think I'll take Councillor Veith moving it to give expression to Commissioner Rapp's direction is that staff report back to council with a plan to engage the public and review
that sounds
options
great.
for leaf collection ahead of the 3-year budget.
Through you, Chair Henry, thank you. Because I think if there was better education and communication about, I mean, leaves come from nature. They grow on our trees. They fall. That's what they're supposed to do. And I think this is something that people are used to. It's a service, and it's really hard to take away. But I think if we can educate people and communicate better why we shouldn't be, for environmental reasons and others, be sucking up the leaves on the side of the road where they, in my opinion, have no business being there. It's not the right place for them. So I look forward to a more fulsome discussion and an education, communication policy or something to go out to take care of this, because this is it's terrible. It's a terrible program in my opinion. Terrible. Anyway, thank you. If I could have a seconder for that, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, we'll take comments after the seconder. Seconded by Councillor Bonagor, and I take in addition to what I read about staff reporting back with options about yada yada, we could also add, and that staff work to enhance communications ahead of the 2019 program about naturalization, something, words to that effect that staff can help craft to leaf them in place. See, there's already, I'm not a branding expert, but there's my start. Councillor Bodley?
I was, through you, Chair Henry, I was just going to say that I'm always surprised by the amount of complaints that we have received through other councillors, because this is, and perhaps this just has to do with the number and age of trees in my neighborhood. I have had 0 people mention this program to me. I've had no complaints. I don't know, and frankly, I don't know anything about this program, to be honest with you, having lived out there for 12 years.
Give it 10 more years and maybe more than 10 leaves will be falling on the ground.
So just speaking to that, perhaps for my purposes, and maybe since you guys are all very keenly aware of it and I'm not, maybe this is a private meeting where somebody can explain to me exactly how this program works. That'd be great.
I'll just share my email with you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I think Commissioner Rapp can take that as some helpful direction. There probably could be some side meetings that you have, but it is. I don't think anybody wants to see that, including. I'll leave it there. But I think it would be helpful in presenting the plan for how we're going to have this conversation with the community and what options may look like at the outset. To provide council with some education on how the program works. Is notwithstanding that some of us have been around for a while and seen more emails than we can shake a stick with leaves that won't fall off on it at. I'm just going to keep going with them because there are way too many. But it's always helpful for us to get some understanding of the nitty-gritty and some of the changes that have been made. The program, as we understood it 3 years ago, has seen some attempts at continual improvement. And so we may not be as up as we think we are on the exact nature of how we're proceeding. So I think an education component to that presentation will be helpful for everybody. There's that. Mayor Jaworski?
For clarity, are we... it sounds like we have 2 components here. One is the education for the 2019 leaf pickup, but is the second component a full reconsultation with the citizens to see if they want it or not? I wasn't quite clear on what that part is.
So I'll look to Mr. Rapp to confirm, but what I heard was, and tried to give voice to, was the staff report back to council with more information and options and how public engagement will proceed. So that would include engaging the public on some of those and options. I don't want to try to telegraph that around here without letting our expert staff do some of their work, but I'll let Mr. further expression.
Certainly through Chair Henry. What I was anticipating in my mind, first doing research, making sure that's well in hand, and then going back out to the community with the various options, but explaining the environmental benefits, how the operation occurs in the city, the struggles with early snowfalls, things like that, and have a complete, comprehensive, really overview of the entire program and the costs associated and the environmental benefits. But I would want that research done before we ask individuals of whether they would wish A, B, or C.
No, that's wonderful. I just want to make sure it was options on that citizens can choose today on how to handle their leaves, or options that we should be considering on canceling or retooling or whatever the pickup. I'm happy on the first one is the one I was looking for.
Well, I think when that comes back, we'll have a robust discussion and we'll identify further direction. The votes at the beginning may or may not look like the votes at the end. So with that motion tabled by Councillor Veith, no further commentary. All those in favor of that direction to staff? That's carried. So that takes us to utilities operating impacts of capital and growth requests. We have item G8 committed here. I'll look for a mover of that. Mayor Jaworski, seconded by Councillor Bonagor. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor? That's carried. Operating impacts of capital and growth recommended. Inflationary increases, those two items. Can I get a mover for those? Mayor Jaworski, seconded by Councillor Bonagor. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried. And that's the utility enterprise. And this takes us to the all the other enterprises: building standards, parking, rental housing. And there's nothing, I think, from cemetery in here. So item 4.2, base budget requests funding. There are 3 items here. Anything anyone wishes to discuss separately? Seeing none, I'll get a mover. Mayor Jaworski, who loves moving things, omnibus. Seconder, Councillor Bodley. Any discussion? All those in favor? That's carried. Base budget requests efficiency, we have 1. This is the expense reduction in rental housing enterprise arising from the conversation we had in December. I'll look for a mover. Moved by Councillor Bodley, seconded by Councillor Vasic. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried. Uncontrollable, turns out we raise property taxes on our own parking lots too. And someone to move B62. Councillor Bodley. Councillor Veith, any discussion? All those in favor? That's carried. This is base budget requests recommended. There are 7 of them. Does anyone wish to discuss any of these 7 items? I'll give you a moment. I'm seeing people turning pages, looking at all 7. That's good. Seeing none, Mayor Jaworski is moving them, seconded by Councillor Vasic. Any discussion? All those in favor then? That's carried. That takes us to operating impacts of capital and growth. The recommended section, there's 1, parking inflationary increase, item G11. For a mover of that item, Councillor Bonagor, seconded by Councillor Mayor Jaworski. Councillor Mayor, any discussion on that? All those in favor? That's carried. Service level change requests. We have 1 service level change increase. Ralph needs some more support. Is there a mover for item S11? Councillor Veith, Mayor Jaworski. Any conversation on S11? Councillor Bonagor.
I just have a question about the amount of money being requested on this. It just seems quite high. I'm wondering if I'll give Ralph a chance to come in. I'm wondering if we could start at a lower level, assess next year, and then look to how effective that's been? Like, could we, instead of starting at 125 for the support, could we be looking at 75 or 100? Or is this just, pardon? No, I'm just curious as to like the function and just how it's, whether is that just an indicator of what you're already using? Like the amount of money that's already kind of transferring between your departments?
Yeah, I think it's helpful to get some more explanation on the item, and then we can get into conversation. Yep, it is.
Oh,
now.
there's the button now. Yes, thank you.
I got this special button, so.
It's a bit of both. It's a bit of trying to transfer funds internally. So Building Standards has a very healthy reserve account. We've been using a lot of consulting services to provide us advice with the e-permitting system and moving forward to the electronic use of technology. We've been trying to use in-house services, so we've made a deal with Max. Originally, we were looking at trying to put a staff resource there, but Max with the IT team thought it'd be more beneficial if we just put a dollar value so that he could use the resources as he best found suitable for that.
Okay, so that makes sense. So instead of asking for a specific staff member to cover these needs, you just get giving the amount of money it takes various staff members to fulfill the needs.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Always good to ask. Knowing is some portion of the battle. Can't remember the number off the top of my head. So it's been moved and seconded. Any other questions, comments on this item? Seeing none, I'll take the vote. All those in favor? That's carried. Olga gets a good workout pivoting. Maybe a repetitive stress item. Let's refer that to HR. So we will take a 2-minute break in place as staff switch laptops to move into the capital budget. Anyone else have elevator music going on in their head right now? Just me? Okay. Okay, it looks like we're ready to go. Councillor Veith, you're right. We could have taken the Jeopardy routine, and it was a very quick changeover that staff made. So we're moving into the capital budget section, beginning with 2019, and then at the end the 2020 to 2028 capital forecast. We'll take each of these motions in turn, getting the number from staff. Routine projects and non-routine projects. To the extent that council made changes last week, those are reflected in the 2019 numbers that we will get per the report we had on the agenda. If there's any items that council will wish to engage on, take a vote separately on, or maybe has some concern on, which I hope would be in the non-routine section. Otherwise, Willie could have dealt with it last week, but we'll take anything that we have. But those items in the non-routine section, flag it, And if it's something that you might want to do something different with or vote differently with, then we'll approve the number for all the remaining projects and then deal with that item individually in that section and take motions accordingly. And then we'll get to the forecast, which is much more blanket, and I can talk more about some of the forecast pieces when we get there. So if that makes sense, good. All right. So we begin with 5.1 sub 1, the routine projects in the CAO's department. And I'll look to finance staff to read out the number in the blank, and then I will have somebody move the thing with the number that's having been read out.
1,237,000.
$1,237,000. Someone care to move the routine project list? Mayor Jaworski, seconded by Councillor Vasic. I assume we're okay with all the items in the routine remaining in the remaining in the routine project items for CAO. I got tied there a little bit. Moved in just for the CAO. We're taking them each in turn on the agenda. Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried. CAO non-routine items. Are there any items in here in the non-routine list that folks would like to have a separate discussion about? And this is occurring to me, I should probably actually pull up my capital budget. Any items, Council? Councillor Bonagor?
I'd like to be able to discuss reference 119, the Uptown Parkade budget line.
119. Okay. Any other lines in CAO non-routine? We can take a moment. It's good that we test this out on Tim first. Any other items, Council? Okay. So, do we have the number for everything that's left?
8,535,000.
Okay, can I get a mover of that balance? Councillor Bonagor, Councillor Bodley, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried. Then Councillor Bonagor, item 119.
I just wanted to pull this out for a little bit of additional discussion because it is a significant amount of money, and it is, parking in Uptown is a pretty big issue. So I was just hoping, first of all, to ask Mr. Anderson to maybe explain what the purpose of having that money set for this year and the next 2 years is.
Thank you, through you, Chair Henry, to Councillor Bonagor. The Uptown parking facility or structure funding, that has actually been within our capital program probably for about 8 or 9 years. And it has been a placeholder amount. There's been an aspiration from our parking strategy back in 2007 to look at all of our surface lots in Uptown and how can we convert them into more development opportunities. And part of the strategy in doing that was to add an additional parking structure in Uptown Waterloo. There's been about 3 or 4 different locations identified as preliminary locations for such a facility. And in 2017, we actually tested the market for one such structure at the corner of Regina and Bridgeport. We weren't happy with the results of the procurement process on that, and we didn't proceed. And we thought through the budget process, it's probably wise that we continue to keep it within sight. Opportunities and land opportunities and development opportunities do come up on us sometimes without a lot of notice, and so being able to pivot quickly with some dollars was thought to be correct and in keeping with our parking strategy for Uptown. So those dollars, again, I would consider them placeholder, and if opportunity arises in 2019, we would activate it with the available funds. You'll see a large portion of it is development charge funding, and so that's been included in our development charge bylaw, I think 17.8 million in total. And then a little bit from our parking reserve and a tiny bit from debt as well. Tiny, I say, in the scope of this big project, it's still a large amount. If we do not see opportunity in 2019, then it would be a carry forward project and reforecast in 2020 as well. And it has certainly been identified as non-routine. There's a lot of unpacking to deal with this for council if and when we do get to that stage.
Because I also recognise that we're going to be doing some studies of parking uptown with the first report due in 2022. So can you explain the advantage or otherwise of having the money potentially available even before that study is complete?
Through you, Chair Henry, are you referring to the Uptown Utilization Studies?
Yes.
So, yeah, no, thank you for that. So those are annual utilization studies that we'll do as the light rail transit system, the ION, comes to life, and we monitor the impact on our overall parking system. Is supply are we in a position of oversupply or undersupply? And what do we forecast on as a move forward basis? I would still recommend council hold the dollars for the parking facility, because I do see it as a key part of the strategy to relieve some of those surface parking locations.
Councillor Bartley?
Through you, Chair Henriette, just like maybe a practical understanding of, just since this has been this month, these funds have been set aside for 8 or 9 years, as you say, a practical understanding of maybe the opportunity cost of that, and also what we actually do with those funds, how it's related to potentially investment income in the city. And investment income with the city, whether that's something that we do with these funds if they're just sitting there and we know that they're not going to be utilized in the very short term. And then opportunity cost vis-a-vis what development charge projects are in 2020 to 2022 that maybe we could be pushing ahead if we recognize that this is not likely to happen until after that.
Through you, Chair Henry. So maybe I'll turn to finance on the opportunity cost front. Development charges themselves, a project specific in the bylaw, I think can't be redirected too easily, but I will turn to Kashwar.
Through you, Chair Henry, development charges are set aside in a separate reserve fund that earns interest. That is the legislation. It requires it to be in a dedicated reserve fund as opposed to kept in reserves where the interest is not allocated to it. So anything in development charges is earning interest. If it's not being used, it's earning interest.
And is attributable to the balance that's generating interest.
Absolutely. It's attributable to development charges itself. So it helps build that development charge balance.
I think as Council could see from the Reserve and Reserve Fund report, there is a large dip into the negative forecast if all the development charge funded projects in the next couple of years proceed as booked. We find ways to, staff certainly find ways to manage this, and they review DC collections on a quarterly basis and whether or not even some routine projects proceed or not proceed based on those balances to try to help manage the reserve levels of some of those. But we do have a DC bylaw to do in 2019 as an update, and so these are places where lots of stuff can get looked at and reviewed at a high level. I see Ms. Patel who wants to say something.
Through you, Chair Henry, we've started work on looking at the development charges bylaw, but with the proposed changes that are being considered at the provincial level, we will evaluate how we look at the development charges and whether we reopen the bylaw or not. So I think that's still something that we need to reassess.
Like, since these are non-routine, they have to come back. It's fair to say if the current provincial government eliminates the ability to collect development charges, we generally will immediately stop funding a lot of growth projects until we can figure out just what the heck to do. And so if they try to eliminate development charges to create housing, it will stop everything in its tracks immediately until we can figure out what to do differently. I think that's a fair, succinct statement. If the province is listening, which I'm sure they are tuned into this webcast. Mayor Jaworski.
I'd be moving this to consider it still as non-routine. It gives us around the horseshoe flexibility for the future, and there has been demand long ago in the past of increased parking north of Herb, and so this gives us flexibility. Whether we take action on it or we wait to see how LRT pans out is another thing, but it gives we're in the steering position here, so I'm happy to move it.
So with that, I'll look for a mover of reference 119. Moved by Councillor Bonagor, seconded by Councillor Bodley. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried. Always good to drill down and have those conversations. We're into community services, routine projects. Are there any question generally before we get numbers? Councillor Freeman?
So my question was more broadly, like, we had passed a motion to ask for some pieces to come into the capital budget. And I guess with now, I don't know whether they won't come in till 2020. I'm just trying to think this through out loud. So the active sports park and the splash pads, I guess those will be in design in 2019, and then we'd look to fund them in capital in 2020. Is that how that's working? I just want to make sure we've got the money right to get these things designed and then built.
I'll look to Commissioner Dykstra.
Through Chair Henry to Councillor Freeman, yes, that is correct. We have that in the budget and positioned such.
So just to further clarify, page 46 of the council packet today. Which is the staff report back on things council asked for or did or all of that. Identifies a few things that are relevant here. One is staff to explore additional funding for construction of 2 additional action sports parks as part of the 2020 to 2022. Changes won't be made to 2019 capital in 2020 to 2028 forecasts, as they'll be addressed as part of the next 3-year budget process. Commissioner Dykstra identified there were funding internally to manage the action sports park design piece in 2019, so that's why we're not seeing a change in 2019, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I'll just add to the forecast too will be based on the design, yes, so to reaffirm that.
Yeah, and you can see on the prior page, page 45, a table with the summary of all the changes that staff have made and incorporated into today's 2019 budget items. So one thing you'll see as a routine item, there's been some revision to the splash pad sheets. This would be the non-Waterloo Park splash pad sheets, the ones, north, east, west, whatever that means. There's now only 2 project sheets rather than 3. Reference 229 is now splash pad design as a routine item for $400 million in 2019. And splash pad construction is listed in the go forward with the balance that remains from there, which is $400 million less, $400,000 less, because that got pulled forward. So those have been adjusted and are reflected, and you'll see in the forecast there's been some wording to reflect that motion that I was going to call attention to when we got there. And the fire chief's fire truck fire chief's deputy chief vehicle was moved out. So those are in that table. But with that clarification, can I get the number for the routine projects then? I see that as 4,531,000.
That's correct, 4,531,000.
I get someone to move that. Councillor Freeman, Councillor Bonagor, any conversation? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Non-routine projects, anything in community services that's remaining in non-routine that any councillor wishes to discuss separately? I haven't seen any. Councillor Bonagor?
Actually, just a clarification on the splash pads, reference 229 and 230.
Yeah.
Can I just...
Sure, go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify that, and it's exciting that we can kind of move these things forward, but just to clarify with the team, so design would be brought forward for all of them to be designed in 2019, but then construction would be over the period 20 to 22. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're not expecting the designs, we're not expecting, like the design's being done all at once, but we're not expecting construction to be done all at once.
So correct? I'll look to Director Silcox-Childs to explain exactly what is in the capital forecast for 2020 to 2022, because you're right on construction, on design.
Absolutely. Good afternoon through you, Chair Henry, to the councillor. The reference number 229 has been changed to routine and changed to 400K, and that will advance the design of Waterloo Park, as well as the three other to-be-determined location splash pads citywide. Construction will follow, and construction would follow in 2020 and 2021, if that makes sense.
So being compressed a little bit to the extent that we can. Councillor Freeman.
I agree with that, but if there's savings to be had by tendering all of them at the same time, I want to seize those savings, because that could be significant.
And
so
again,
it's one tender, one contractor, 3 sites.
I think we'll
4 sites.
I think we'll look to the director to speak to his plan.
And again, through you, Chair, through the to the councillor. The tender that will be going out, it's actually prepared now, but we'll pull it back and be adding to it. We'll be working with procurement to secure the best efficiencies we can. We do anticipate that we will find efficiencies, certainly with the 3. The splash pad that's planned for Waterloo Park, the budget amount for that one is significantly less than the other 3, because the ultimate plan is to have 2 smaller splash pads in Waterloo Park. So the other 3 is where we would likely see the greatest efficiencies, because we could design the base plan for those, all the underground pieces, you could say, and see some efficiency there.
So hopefully that's helpful. So we're still now in non-routine in the 2019 capital budget. Any item, I didn't hear any item that councillors would like to speak on separately inside the 2019 non-routine projects and community services. Councillor Veith?
Through you, Chair Henry, thank you. Where's the Button Factory elevator? Is that, because that's under non-routine, line 284.
We'll look over to Commissioner Dykstra. The motion that council approved last week was 2020 to 2022 as part of the 3-year, which is in the forecast and not the 2019 budget. And design, there were dollars identified internally, and so didn't need a special request. But Commissioner Dykstra?
Yeah, just reaffirming that is the intention, using existing dollars in 2019 to design the elevator. That will inform the dollars needed for construction. We've got a point to that specifically on page 46 of the packet that speaks to that intention there.
So the number for non-routine in community services, I see as
40,255,000.
Okay, can I get a mover for that amount? Councillor Vasek, Mayor Jaworski, any conversation? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's That's carried. That takes us to corporate services, beginning with routine projects. Any other routine projects, Council, that we didn't talk about last week? I don't think there are any that I've heard, so that's $3,938,000. Councillor Freeman.
I just can't remember whether the communications piece was in routine or non-routine.
So we're still on routine then, with that clarification. We need a mover for the routine projects. Councillor Vasic, Councillor Bodley. Any conversation? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried. And now we have non-routine projects. Which items would members of council like to separately discuss? Councillor Vasic?
The corporate branding review, reference 402, 5.32.
402. Any other items that members of council would wish to discuss separately? Item 401. So can I get the, I know that's what you're working on. So we'll get the number of all those except 401 and 402. Over the last 5 weeks, I haven't heard any others. So there's nothing. That's non-routine. Okay, well, that makes that one easy. So we'll just deal with 401 and 402 separately. Shall we start with 401? Just to start with the lower number. Councillor Freeman.
I think council made a good decision not to move ahead with the 311 call center, and I don't see why we should be paying into something that we said no to.
So I would look for Ms. Patel first.
Through you, Chair Henry, I'll just start it and then I'll turn it over to Tony. The capital sheet does indicate that the city is not pursuing its own 311 call center because that was not supported by council. And the scope of the project has been completely revised, and it is looking to teaming up with a pilot customer service with City of Kitchener's call center so that we have after-hours service for bylaw-related calls. So really, Shane would be able to speak to it. I mean, it's budgeted in corporate services, but it is really piloting something with bylaw. So the scope and range is completely different than what was originally planned.
Mr. Turner?
Yes, through you, Chair Henry. The intent of this initiative is to improve our customer service in terms of being able to respond to calls on a 24/7 basis. The plan, given the constraints with regard to trying to do this sort of or take this sort of approach in-house, the plan is to use the existing or enter into an agreement, if feasible, with the existing call center services provided by the City of Kitchener in their facility that they jointly work with the region of Waterloo. The plan would be at this point to look at the calls that are that come in after our normal hours. It may be a phase that, or it may be a phased approach whereby we would look at transitioning to all the calls. But right now, what we're looking at doing is focusing on those calls that would come in after 4:30 on a weekday and on weekends. At this point, given the experience, if I could say so, the experience I had with helping to develop the call center when I was with the City of Kitchener to take bylaw enforcement calls 24/7, I think there is an advantage to looking at the existing system within the city of Kitchener, we have the experience that we can build on with regard to starting from scratch in the city of Kitchener, and we've got that ability to transfer some of that knowledge and experience. The city of Kitchener now currently deals with all bylaw enforcement calls on a 24/7 basis. As I said, sorry, excuse me, we would look at a phased approach just to deal with the calls after hours, which are now going to an answering machine.
Okay, so I'll see Councillor Freeman first, but I just want to correct the record on this. I pulled the minutes from the 2016 budget. The item at that time, which was also reference 401 for a corporate customer service program 311, was approved in principle as a non-routine item. It was approved 4 in favor, 3 opposed. And staff did not ultimately bring back a report to activate those dollars and follow through with them. But according to the minutes, it was approved. It just didn't get enacted upon. So just to make sure we're correct on that, they'll go Councillor Freeman, and then I see hands, Councillor Vasic, Mayor Jaworski, and then some others.
Well, I'm happy to say I was opposed to it the first time. My challenge is what are we doing with this data? Are we going to fundamentally go out and respond to these calls? Because that's the thing. If people think that they can leave a message here and that it's going to fundamentally change the service delivery, that's one thing. But if it's not going to fundamentally change the service delivery, I'd rather spend money like that on service delivery, not on the city of Kitchener running a call center.
Through you, Chair Henry, I wouldn't say that right off the start that it would fundamentally change our service delivery. What it would do is it would be a fundamental shift in terms of the information that we give to residents. Right now, our response to bylaw enforcement calls are immediate in some cases, if it's a noise complaint or parking complaint. Whereas other times, the response is that we would, let's say it's a landlord-tenant issue or something, we would call the complainant and book an appointment. Part of the challenge now is that if somebody calls at, say, 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, they get an answering machine and then they would get a call back on Monday. So they're left for a couple of days not knowing what to expect. So it's not necessarily just about responding immediately, although that will be an element of it. It's more about ensuring that the public knows what to expect when they call us and that they've talked to a live person. They know what the process is to inspect, even though an inspection or a response may not happen immediately.
So I have Councillor Vasic, Mayor Jaworski.
Through you, Chair, that was one of my questions. And another one of my questions is, this is so operational, but I'm sorry, but one of the things that's really hard when you call into the city is like, you don't talk to a live person. So is it going to be easy that will they be directed immediately to a live person, or will there be any automated system where you have to wait and press a number and then you go somewhere wrong, you know?
Well, the details are still to be worked out, obviously, if this initiative moves forward, but I can tell you that the goal would be that the person dialing the number would get a live person automatically. And it's similar to some of the services that the City of Kitchener already provides to the City of Waterloo with regard to after-hours calls for, I believe it's our water utilities and emergency call-outs.
Mayor Jaworski?
Well, Mr. Turner just answered my question. I was going to say, isn't this similar to other services that we already have? So it seems like a good opportunity. What will happen when somebody calls in so they call in after 4:30 and it is something that's of a nature that we respond to? How do our staff get dispatched? Or sorry, will the staff get dispatched? I don't need to know how, but will our staff get dispatched?
Yes. Again, depending on the nature of the call, staff will be dispatched automatically if it's an issue that requires immediate attention. But if it's something where the information is going to be logged for an inspection the following day or something like that, then the information will be transferred electronically to our office to start what we would call a service request.
Thank you.
Councillor Bodley.
Through you, Chair Henry, and sorry, maybe this is just a process type question, but it's coming back anyways, yes? So we're going to engage in all of these discussions more completely when that happens. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think the value of the separate pieces, if council knows now that it doesn't want more information on these items and staff should stop working on them because council won't approve a funding release. That's valuable to deal with. But because they're non-routine, in order to act on them in terms of any dollars, staff would have to come back with a report for council to release it, at which we would have, I presume, more detail on what we're doing in this regard and can have the opportunity again.
So thank you for that clarification. Appreciate it. So yeah, so from my perspective, I see part of Councillor Freeman's point, and I see the other side as well too. So for me, I'd like to see that information, having not been on council and had this discussion previously, before I approve anything. That I don't really have a strong opinion on it one way or the other at this point until we have more information.
Also fair. So I think what would be prudent is to get a motion to approve 401 as a non-routine project and take a vote on that. If it fails, then it fails. If it doesn't fail, well, we'll see a future report later when Mr. Turner has more details for us. So is there someone who would like to put that on the floor? Mayor Jaworski, Councillor Bodley, any more discussion on item 401? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? Councillor Bonagor, Councillor Freeman. So that carries. Next up is item 402. There's two councillors looking to talk about this. I'll go to Councillor Vasic, since she hasn't got to start a conversation on one of these yet.
Great. Okay, so reference 402 is corporate branding review. And like most things, I have mixed feelings because everything's complicated. Like everything's good, but there's challenges, I think, to everything. So I really see the merits in doing a branding review in terms of making sure that things are consistent, our messaging is consistent, people can find their way around town easily. Consistent branding is good for talent retention, economic development, all these things. But I'm wondering a couple of things. If there's overlap or potential overlap for combining the community consultation with the community visioning exercise that IPPW is doing in 2020, just because I think that even though it's for our internal messaging and making sure that we're being consistent across the board, I think that community visioning conversation may unearth things about how we message that we would miss if we did a consultation in 2019 with the community. I think there even though there's not a direct overlap, I think there might be some overlap there. And that's a hard one for me to communicate because like I'm just seeing them together but not linearly. And then the other piece is the amount. So I'd love a little bit more information about the explicit deliverables and outputs, and if there are any other models to find some wiggle room in the amount there.
I'll look to Tony first, and then Mr. Rapp may have something on the other projects that Councillor Vasic mentioned. Tony?
Through you, Councillor Henry, to Councillor Vasic. In terms of the visioning, I think my limited understanding of the visioning exercise, that certainly has a planning orientation to it. This is a review. There's not an intention to change the brand or to the logo or the brand promise or the proposition at all. So the kind of consultation that we contemplate doing as part of this review would be more around, are we delivering on our mission? So our mission is to deliver efficient and effective services that, to the benefit of the community. So we'd want to understand, are we delivering on that promise? What are we doing well? What are the obstacles? So it's really not to change or to influence what the current brand is. So not sure if there would be that opportunity, but if there would be, we certainly would be open to it. In terms of deliverables, some of the things that we want to make sure that we can do is have a brand standard that people can understand, both the community can understand, how our brand works, how it should be applied, but as well as staff, so that there isn't inconsistent usage on signage, on just all applications where you'd see our brand and our logo, as well as a writing guide. So we want to make sure that our writing is clear, it's transparent, and it's as error-free as possible. So we do need a writing guide as well, so that would be another deliverable.
So this wouldn't include if you have a brand standard and it requires changing things around the community on your on our signs, on literature, things like that. It doesn't include that.
Correct. We're not looking to change any elements of the corporate identity, which would be the signage, the logos. We're not going to change colors. We're not changing design. That's not part of this exercise.
So does a brand standard doesn't indicate where there are consistencies and inconsistencies, and then if you notice there were inconsistencies, would we presumably have to change that?
Through you, Chair Henry, yes, it would actually. The guide would indicate proper usage. So there are instances that we become aware of, for example, where we're not necessarily using the right corporate colors. So the guide would indicate what the colors are, the Pantone colors, sizes, dimensions, that sort of thing, and that's lacking currently.
Okay, thank you. So to me, that still seems relatively high. So then I'm also the second piece of my question then is, where's there wiggle room to find a lower cost for this project, if that's possible?
Through you, Chair Henry, to the councillor, absolutely there's wiggle room. That was just a number. We had to try to come up with a number. There was some capital dollars that had been allocated previously to the call center project, so we thought, let's try to reallocate that for this. So we certainly would come back with a project that perhaps would be more reflective, so we certainly could scale it back to a number that the council is much more comfortable with.
That explains why the number is what it is, because 3 years ago the call center number was 287, and the numbers we see between 401 and 402 are 100 and 187, which is 287. There you go. The more you know. Okay. Commissioner Rapp, did you want to get in on community visioning piece under that Councillor Vasic mentioned?
Certainly, through Chair Henry to Councillor Vasic. I think the visioning exercise that we want to do in 2020 will be, it will be involving all departments for certain, but it will be more of the traditional land use. And when I say that, of where we want to see the community go in the next 20 years, what you're looking for in open space, what makes you feel comfortable, vibrancy, things like that, which will then set the foundation for the next official plan review in 2021. So we could probably take some of the information that Tony gets through his work and weave it in. They're not mutually exclusive of each other, but ours is more of a traditional land use of where we want to see the community go as a whole, not necessarily the brand. A branding could come out of it. We don't know when we could respond that way.
Look for others on this. Councillor Bonagor, I know Councillor Freeman will want to speak to it as well. Councillor Bonagor?
Through you, Chair Henry. As someone who works in communications and has experience with branding, I find this number very high. So I would very much like to find out the nuts and bolts behind it and how else these results could be achieved within a different financial framework.
Councillor Freeman?
Fundamentally,
I can't relegate,
I'm totally
recognize
struggling
the
with this
delegate.
number. Totally struggling with the number. I want to say no to this altogether because I feel like what you're describing to me is a regular course of business.
Through Chair Henry, absolutely, we could come back with a number that's much smaller. We could probably do something because this does require a different skill set. Different skills are required to write a brand guide, for example, than a writing guide. So 187 is high, but realistically, we probably could do something in the $75,000 to $100,000 range to do the consultation in a proper way, and then to do guides that are meaningful. And there would probably be some adjustments required on some of the collateral materials that be required. So I think realistically, a $75,000 to $100,000 probably is a much more comfortable number in terms of delivering what we'd like to.
Councillor Bodley, and then we'll start circling back to folks that have already got in. Councillor Bodley.
Thank you, through you, Chair Henry. As a sales and marketing professional, I definitely see some value in having consistent branding and style guide for a corporation. I definitely see that. I struggle a little bit with the number as well too, but and perhaps I will get excoriated over this, but I'd like to address maybe the elephant in the room, notwithstanding the fact, notwithstanding the fact that some people may be upset seeing that we're spending $187,000 on corporate branding. I would think, in light of some things that the province is discussing right now, that they would really hate the idea that we spent $187,000 on corporate branding that was never initiated. So my perspective on this would be that it should I don't see the urgency behind it, and it should be moved into 2020 to 22 at minimum, when we have a little bit more clarity about the intentions of the province.
Okay, others, interesting suggestion. Others that want to get in on conversation that haven't, others that want to come back. I saw your hand again, Councillor Bonagor. Okay. Tony?
Through you, Chair Henry, to Councillor Bodley, our intention would be to wait for the outcome of the review. Agree entirely that there could be some recommendations that could impact this work, so our intention would not be to come forward until we know what direction we might go. So we'd be looking at probably like a fourth quarter project if we were to go forward.
Okay, so we have nothing, we've had a lot of discussion and some information. We have nothing on the floor regarding 402. Is there anyone that has anything they'd like to do with 402 that they'd like to suggest to council? And then we can turn that into a motion. Councillor Bodley?
So I would like to move it to 2020. I understand the bringing it forward in fourth quarter, and I appreciate that. That should be at a minimum, but I think moving it to 2020 gives us a little bit more time to review this and see where we stand, and it's not spending staff time and effort on reviewing something that they have to deliver for 2019 that may not necessarily be worth voting on. So that's my motion.
So I'll see that Deputy Director to consider this item as part of the three-year budget process, because then it doesn't bake us into any other specific motions that have already been written today, and let staff come back. Is there a seconder for the shifting it to 2020 or beyond? Mayor Jaworski, conversations on that? Councillor Vasek?
Through you, Chair. I don't know what my question is yet, but one of the things I was thinking also was maybe deferring it to the next budget cycle, especially if there was going to be potentially some overlap with the community visioning, which it sounds like, not really, maybe, who knows, it's not really worth taking the risk for that. So I guess for me, it seems like it would be worthwhile doing this year as a way to demonstrate our cohesion, but also willingness to collaborate with other municipalities, local municipalities, but then also to be strong in our own messaging. I think that's also worthwhile. So, I really hear what you're saying, but I'd be okay with it in this year's budget. But I love the 75,000 number because I believe it can be done. Just because I am not the expert in social media and communications, but I do believe it can be done in that amount. That's why I like that number. You should have put it at 120, 100 to 125 or something. I'd have been like, 100 sounds great. So that would be my preference, would be to do it this year at 75,000-ish or whatever.
Did I get a motion moved and seconded? Good. Okay. So that's what we're debating, about pushing it to staff to consider as part of the next budget cycle, 2020 to 2022, which people can vote against. They can try to amend the motion. They can do a whole lot of things. So let's see who wants to start doing stuff. I'll go to the seconder first, which is, I think, Mayor Jaworski, then I'll come back around.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing around the council table here, a lot of hesitation, want a lot more information, want better understanding of the issues, better understanding of the investment. There's things going on at the provincial level that come into play here. And because there's so much hesitation that at the council table, I'd hate to see staff work on something, then come back to us and we have something that may or may not fly at all. So I just prefer to let's pause. The earliest we'd probably work on it would be fourth quarter anyways. So let's pause on it, think about it during the strategic plan. Maybe something like this will come up during the strategic plan, refer to the 3-year budget, and we'll go from there.
In support of the motion, Councillor Bonagor.
I also support the idea to move it until the next budget. I don't think that should indicate that you don't need, there's no need to not start on some of this now. Like with a style guide, you don't have to create one yourself. You can get one off the shelf with Canadian Press and then make amendments within the city to meet our particular requirements. changing everyone's computer to Canadian English is a great first step. So Max IT, if you can do like a corporation-wide fix there, like there are small steps that we can do now that can have immediate impact on what you're trying to achieve. I'd also be interested in kind of separating what sound to me like two different things, which is doing the nuts and bolts very well, and then seeing how the community is receiving it. I don't necessarily see that those have to be the same thing. But yes, so right now, though, I think it's wise to give it a year and come forward with a plan on how to tackle these things.
And the number may look different at that time. Councillor Freeman?
I like the way that the mayor shaped this, that there's too many questions around this piece. I'm happy to effectively defer this so that folks can set their minds to it. I am not sold on this work at all. So I need a better selling job in 2020. Just saying. And I'll leave it at that. Like I can support this because it's going to come out for 2019.
Any other discussion on this issue? Before I take the vote, I'll just note good conversation. I saw that the commissioner of that area is quite happy. The referral is fine, and that's something staff can work with, so that's useful. And I'd also note that there is some movement on this issue as well already with our new website, which does have a posted style guide and a lot of guidance to staff on how to deal with the web-specific content of what we roll out, and can be a baseline for where we move to. So to Councillor Bonagor's point about staging this rollout, how well the website and the way we're doing things differently there is received by folks is a good indication of how it may roll out to other components of the organization. So I think we've already have the test that is in front of us now that is in beta, and we're trying to get feedback on. So that should guide staff as well. And I read it; it's good. I enjoyed looking at the style guide for the website. I think it's got some good stuff in there. So with that, we'll take the vote of staff referral to the next budget cycle of this item. All those in favor? That's everyone. Carried. Okay. So that takes us to routine projects in integrated planning and public works. I will look to staff for the number without capital reference 635, on which I have a conflict. So we'll give that a minute to catch up. There was nothing in the IPPW routine projects that were raised last week. So, well, there were some items that we had questions of, but none that were pulled. So I think the number is 22174, and then some zeros. I'll look for a mover of that. Councillor Freeman, Councillor Bonagor. Any questions or comments on that? Seeing none. All those in favor? That's carried. And I'll vacate the chair for the remaining routine item.
635. Okay, well, I'll move 635. Councillor Veith, Councillor Bonagor. All those in favor? Okay, thanks.
Are there any non-routine projects in IPPW that any member of council wishes to discuss or deal with separately? Councillor Freeman?
Sorry, I just had a question. It's with regard to the automated speed enforcement. Is that a capital requirement that's required to make that happen? It's on page 121 of the business plans. and it's related to automated speed enforcement in school zones. And I was trying to better understand if that's a capital investment that has to happen to make that happen, or because somehow or another I lost sight of it too in terms of what the number is and where it is.
Look for Ms. Kayla when she's ready.
I don't have the number totally off the top of my head, but it is for capital. It's for the purchase of the cameras and the boxes required for the cameras once we know how we're proceeding with the automated speed enforcement.
So can I just speak to that?
Sure.
Councillor Henry. So I guess for me, like, there's a few pieces to this in my mind's eye. So we've allocated some financial resources associated with traffic calming and studies and that kind of thing. And a lot of times the traffic calming requests we get tend to be in school zones because there's a higher level of pedestrian traffic. And there's also an increased volume in drop-offs and I'm going to say vehicle movements that create conflict with those pedestrians. And I just wondered whether or not, from a cost-benefit analysis and an actual effectiveness, whether instead of doing a traffic calming study, which, by the way, we've never been able to find the resources to fully fund, whether we're better off to reallocate that resource to something like this, an automated speed enforcement. And you know, I guess as a move forward position today, so that we don't delay things, maybe that's just something the team could take back. And then if they saw an opportunity that this is a better bang for the buck from a capital perspective, they could bring it back to us and say, we'd like to swap out these capital expenditures to bring this online. Because I don't really want to dissect the capital budget to try to find this, because I think you're better positioned to look at that than I am. But those are my thoughts, and if we're looking also at considering a reduction in speeds within neighborhoods as a part of our transportation master planning piece, this could also be a tool to enforce that plan as well.
The automatic speed enforcement is something that the province of Ontario is allowing us to do. It's similar to when we did the community safety zones a good number of years ago. At this time, there's not a lot of documentation on how we're to provide this service. As a region, the municipalities within the region have decided that we will focus on school zones, but at this time, we don't know how much it will cost, where we will put them. We may only be able to afford having 1 or 2 cameras within each municipality within the region. There's more questions than answers at this time. So the money that was placed in the capital budget was done so as a placeholder, so that we had some funds to move forward with this program once we figured out what the program actually was.
Through Chair Henry. That's fine. And maybe it's something to look at for future capital budgets, but it seems to me that there's an opportunity here. One of the questions I failed to ask earlier was, if this comes back, I would also like to know whether or not any tickets that are issued through that process, whether that's revenue for us as a municipality or it goes straight into the POAs at the province. Because if it goes straight to the province, then we're basically entirely funding a provincial service.
At this time, that's one of the questions that we have as well. It's similar to the red light camera program. So we're going through all of the information that we have, and the information we don't have, we're asking.
So I think stay tuned, just the summary on on that. So I'll ask again, are there any non-routine projects that council would like to discuss separately out of IPPW? Seeing none, I'll look for the number, which I see on the screen is 18,722,000. Can I get a mover of the non-routine projects? Councillor Freeman, seconded by Councillor Bonagor. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried. That brings us to the library. Councillor Freeman, are there is there any routine projects that any member of council wishes to discuss separately? If not, I'll take the number. 392,000. And then given the fill in the box, we'll do them twice. Councillor Freeman moving the routine project, seconded by Councillor Veith, as library board member. All those in favor of the routine projects, and the number on non-routine is 3748000. No, that's wrong. Non-routine 3748000. Moved by Councillor Freeman, seconded by Councillor Bodley. Any discussion on these items? There's certainly enthusiasm on these items. All those in favor? That's carried. That brings us to the 2020 to 2028 capital forecast. As noted earlier, council did make some recommendations and motions last week, which certainly affects the forecast. Council, in fact, did another one today. The motions here reflect that staff did not take the time to update the capital budget book prior to this meeting in the forecast. That's a lot of work. So under community services, where we gave them specific direction, there's some extra wording you see in the recommendation to reflect we're approving the thing, and there's this other stuff we did, so approve all the stuff, right? That's basically a global motion to reflect what last week's was. And that way, staff didn't have to redo the forecast, because we will get a approved 2019 capital budget and forecast document done after we've approved all the stuff, and so that way staff only have to do it once. So that's what that looks like. So just as we're navigating it. And it's approved in principle, all this will come back. So items that you see in the forecast for 2028 may end up being 2026, or maybe out of it completely, or there's lots of stuff that will happen between now and when we get to actually approving these items, just for clarity. So with that, we'll start with Chief Administrative Office Department. The 9-year forecast is $47,591,000. Moved by Councillor Freeman, seconded by Councillor Bodley. Any discussion on any of these? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried. The community services number is $132,430,000, subject to all that stuff we did. Moved by Councillor Veith, seconded by Councillor Vasic. The V's, Team V. Over there, I've got Team B over here and Team V over there. I used to write speaking order just by last name initial, and it's you guys are. I realized midway through that I knew I had multiple B's, but I forgot I had multiple V's. It's been no comment and just J over there. So did I get a mover and seconder for that, Olga? Yes, I did, and then I started talking. So, anyways, all those in favor. Ask a question before we do that. Councillor Bonagor.
Through you, Chair Henry. It's a fairly minor thing, but reference number 282, which is the facility expansion for material storage. There seem to be a lot of assumptions on the request sheet, like assuming this, assuming that. So I'm just wondering, it's listed as having potentially 3 new storage facilities built over like one every 2 years. I'm wondering, would it be okay to do that maybe on a 3-year schedule, and then we can assess as we go along to see if we really do need that 3rd facility?
Sorry. It's 282, you said?
So yeah, so it's hang on. Oh, sorry, no, 280, yeah, 282. So it's space planning implementation for material storage.
Yes.
And it's listed as one to be built in 2019, and then the next one in 2021, and the next in 2023. But from my reading of the request sheet, like, we're not even sure if we need 3 yet. We're not entirely sure what sizes we do need. So I'm just wondering if we could build a bit more space into that planning. So perhaps they're every 3 years instead of every 2.
Presently, we are short of storage space. We have been renting outside to store certain material, and so in order to catch up, we would like to have a storage in major facilities like Service Center, Rim Park, and WGMRC. These are the areas where I would like to have the storage areas to be built, and Moses Springer. So that's the intent of this one. Presently, we don't have it, and we are growing up. So.
And I note the 2019 version we've dealt with today already.
Like, we've already approved 2019, so once that's built, will there still be an urgent rush to get the next 1 or 2 online, or like, will that not buy us some time?
It is primarily the storage materials are associated to the respective facilities. So it will, if we place that one at one spot, then the transportation will become an additional task. So that's the reason we wanted to have storage at the respective facilities. Yes, we can space it out, but it will improve our efficiency on our workforce.
I'd note that if it went every 3 years rather than every 2 years, it changes not at all anything in the motion. Commissioner Dykstra?
Just through the chair to council, material storage for our staff is a challenge overall. I just want to note that we're trying to maximize space for the use of the public. It competes with that, their shops, their tools. We have a lot of logistics with that. And also we're trying to meet those needs of our community group. So there is a community facing piece to, some of the skate clubs too. There's a lot of material or items that they need stored. Some of our music groups as well, they ask for storage. So we try to accommodate. That puts a strain on their needs or their requirements, but also on our operation as well. So just to reinforce, there is a strong value in community facing with these dollars as well.
And they're basically 100% DC funded minus the Micaris tax, which is the 10% deduction, because soft infrastructure is too soft to fully fund. Councillor Bodley?
And sorry, I just wanted to piggyback on what Commissioner Dykstra was saying. There's a significant need from neighborhood associations as well too, for storage space, for supplies for events that they run, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know how this ties in with our neighborhood strategy as well, but I've heard that for sure.
So I think that's perhaps food for thought, Sunda, when you come forward for approval at 3-year capital to that the project sheet may look a bit more detailed as we get more information. And that will aid any conversation that may happen. But good to flag. Any other discussion on the forecast in community services? Seeing none, it's been moved and seconded, correct? All those in favor? That's carried. Next, we're in corporate services. And so the number is 44,839,000. Any conversation in here in the forecast? Seeing none, moved by Councillor V, seconded by Councillor Bodley. Any conversation here? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried. IPPW. That's larger because everything's bigger in IPPW. It must be the integration. 302,082,000. A mover for that. Councillor Freeman, Councillor Bonagor. Any conversation on the IPPW forecast? This one changes the most, I think, as we go through these things. All those in favor? That's carried. Then the library is 22,632. Yeah, mover of that. Councillor Bartley, Councillor Beath. Any conversation on this? I'll note very far out in the forecast is upgrades to the main library for which no funding and no strategy has really been identified yet, but it's far enough in the forecast, and that's a DC bylaw consideration and some other matters, and it's far enough out that it's really not this council that will make that determination. But I flag that as a significant new item that's shown up. And by putting our hands up, it doesn't mean it's happening, it means it's in the forecast. So look for a motion. I think it's been moved and seconded already. All those in favor? That's carried. And then I'll look to staff to give me the all-in numbers for 219. Are those the totals on the bottom I should just read off then? Or no, different numbers. Okay, go ahead.
That the 2019 capital budget of $105,328,000 be approved, and further that council approve in principle the 2020 to 2028 capital forecast totaling $549,574,000.
Okay, can I get a mover? Mayor Jaworski maybe, seconded by Councillor Bassick. Conversation, it's all the work we just did. All those in favor? That's carried. We could talk about a $5 hammer for a few hours. Would you like to do that? Okay. So then the debenture financing, that's come up. The first one is related to Carnegie Library repurposing. Mover of that item. Councillor Bonagor, Councillor Bodley, any conversation on the item we already really approved? All those in favor? That's carried. Then item 2, which is related to the rec center addition and repurposing. A mover of that item, Councillor Bonagor, Councillor Veith. I know we'll see a more fulsome report on that one. Oh, I used fulsome. I didn't mean to. I will see a more detailed report on that one coming forward later to identify in more detail the financing strategy, but this was in the budget sheets. And we need to approve it now. All those in favor? That's carried. And that takes us to the second last item, which is the work that we already have. And I'll look for those numbers from Brad.
That the 2019 operating budget be approved with an average property tax increase of 2.2% over the 2018 and a total property tax levy of $74,964,634.
Okay. Moved by Councillor Bodley, seconded by Mayor Jaworski. I was going to look at you. All right. All those in favor? That's carried. And the last item, before I take adjournment just on this, I wanted to extend on behalf of council, including Councillor Hanmer, who illness got the better of today, our appreciation to the entire staff team from finance and across all of the departments and divisions for all of the work that brought us to today. I think the priorities of the city are reflected through its budget, and they are delivered through our staff and our volunteers in partnership with our community. And it is no easy task, and we appreciate the countless hours you put into getting the books and the data and the information in front of us, and the even more countless hours afterwards from answering questions and queries so that council was equipped to make good decisions today based on good information. And we know that the work on the next round is already started. So on behalf of all of us and the community, thank you for all of the work that you've put into and continue to put into making this city a great place to live. And with that, unless there are any comments from staff, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Tim, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yes, Chair Henry, if we can do a special thank you to you for your guidance through the budget process. And I want to echo your remarks to the staff team, but council, we really appreciate your engagement from December 10th when it was tabled right up to budget day here. It's an enormous task, and it was a learning opportunity for us and the new council members as well. So hopefully we all gained from that process. And as you noted, Councillor Henry, it is about community building, and this is the enabling mechanism, and it helps to guide ourselves and council as well as we move forward. So many thanks for that. And now we move toward implementation of a lot of projects, as you know. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Councillor Freeman?
I just wanted to know when would be the right time that we can provide feedback on the budget docs, like what your thoughts were on when that would be.
So that's a good flag. That was in my notes, to have notes in discussions with finance staff. March FSP thereabouts may be a good opportunity to do that, but not today. Is let the process digest and figure out what feedback we can provide to staff so that we can have an effective and efficient 3-year budget delivery that meets the needs of council. Ms. Patel?
Through you, Chair Henry, and we need to also bring back to Council the results of the survey that has been done on the budget communication strategy. So those are the 2 items we definitely need to bring back to Council. It might be in March or it might be in April, because the survey closes February 15th. So it hasn't yet closed. March may be too early to bring it. We might bring the 2 together.
So what the public needs and what councillors themselves need, I think, if we can take those together, that will make for a good conversation. I say, talking with finance staff, many of the recommendations that were made in the 3-year budget cycle have been reflected here. And sometimes we may want to go back to, I thought I would like that, but turns out I don't like that much. And so there may be some of that for those of us that have returned, but we'll value that feedback. I know somebody wants to move adjournment. Councillor Bodley was the most enthusiastic about it. Councillor Freeman seconds that motion. All those in favour? That's carried. We're adjourned. Thank you very much. And we have to turn it over to the mayor to approve all the stuff we just approved.
But wait, there's more. Welcome to the City of Waterloo Special Council meeting Monday, February 11th, 2019. Can I have disclosure of pecuniary interest, general nature thereof? Seeing nothing unusual. Reports of committees from February 4th. Somebody want to approve that? Councillor Veith, Councillor Henry. All those in favor? It's all of us. Proposed operating budget, which I didn't write anything into the blanks, but as previously advertised. Proposed operating budget that we just approved. Moved by Councillor Henry, second by Councillor Bodley. All those in favor? The capital budget that we just approved. Moved by Councillor Henry, second by Councillor Bonagor. All those in favor? Enactment of bylaws. Somebody want to move some bylaw? Councillor Veith does. Councillor Vasic does. All those in favor? Motion to adjourn. Councillor Veith, Councillor Bodley, with much enthusiasm. All those in favor? That's all of us. Thank you.